Today's gospel lesson is very relevant to the crisis our nation is experiencing today. It is found within John's account of the calling of Philip and Nathaniel, or Bartholomew. It's the calling by Jesus of them to be his disciples. After Philip was called by Jesus, Philip then went to tell Nathanael, his friend, that he had found the Messiah. We have found him, about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth. Well, this brought an immediate skeptical response from Nathanael. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Without hearing anything else like a logical explanation, what appears to be prejudice based upon ill-founded information or untruths came to life in Nathanael. Prejudice was not new to the ancient Jews. Just look how they treated the Samaritans and any Gentile. But why? Why was the small Jewish town of Nazareth the object of prejudice, or at best, negative bias thinking? It could have been that it had no mention in the prophets and was of no real importance in the Hebrew heritage. But there was more. Without fact, it was thought to be a small backwater town without the sophistication of larger historic noted towns. It was considered to be Hicksville, in other words. But this was most likely unfounded and was not true. Recent archaeology places Nazareth in a very close proximity to the Roman-built city of Sepphoris, and was very near the major international north-south trade route. This would have meant that the residents of this small town would have been exposed to international culture more than an unsophisticated people. It would also have meant that many of the skilled workers in Nazareth may have worked from time to time in the nearby city, Sepphoris. And maybe even Jesus and his father had carpenter jobs there. All of this would have meant some degree of sophistication in that nearby small town, certainly more than being Hicksville. It is apparent that this candidate to become a disciple was prejudiced. He had preconceived negative reactions to anyone who lived in Nazareth. In his mind, there was no way the Messiah could come from there. We may forget that Jesus' disciples were human, had the same human attributes as we have, even to being prejudiced. George Aiken, the late senator from Vermont, once said, Quote, if we were to wake up some morning and find that everyone was the same race, creed, and color, we will find some other cause for prejudice by noon. End of quote. So true. Sadly, this is a prevalent condition of humanity. Seemingly, we must always have someone or something to look down upon in order to elevate ourselves. When prejudice overtakes one's life, displaying itself in actions of hurting someone else, this is the sign of the worst attributes of prejudice: hate and its bitter results. Make no mistake, this is what we are experiencing at this very moment. Prejudice in the form of racism and blind nationalism has been fueled by lies and extremism in order for overt actions of hate to bring our society and nation to the brink of chaos and destruction. Although some may say this is about political differences. No, in reality, it is a result of prejudice in the form of racism. There's little doubt that during this past year we have come face to face with the ugly results of prejudice in the form of racism. Tragically, prejudice in the form of racism has become ingrained into the very fabric of our lives and institutions, and now has taken the form of sedition. This is our society, and this is a dark reality in which we find ourselves today. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King once stated this truthful observation. Quote, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. End of quote. This now brings us back to the story of Nathanael. His comment of, can anything good come out of Nazareth, was immediately recognized by Philip for what it was: an irrational prejudice response. He knew that engaging in any kind of debate would most likely not lead to the conclusion of convincing Nathanael as to who this Jesus was. You know, I think we all have experienced such debates and the futility. We soon discovered that they are futile, for they only put the other person on the defensive, and they become governed by saving-faced word games. Prejudices are only overcome through experiences and not words. The noted New York minister Ralph W. Trautwein once stated, quote, in overcoming prejudice, working together is more effective than talking together. End of quote. This is saying that it is experiencing life together that changes attitudes and prejudices. In the book To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch tells his son Scott, quote, first, If you can learn a single trick, Scott, you get along a lot better with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. End of quote. You see, by allowing yourself to experience the other person's life, you begin to understand them and to hopefully deal with any prejudice. Now, this is how Philip dealt with Nathaniel in helping him to get beyond his preconceived thoughts and prejudices. He did the simplest thing by asking him, "Come and see." I'm not going to argue with you, Nathaniel. Just come and see for yourself. Allow yourself to experience being in the presence of this Nazarene, this Jesus. To his credit, Nathaniel agreed to follow Philip to see for himself. Now, when Jesus met Nathaniel, he greeted him by saying, Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Such a statement showed an insight which could only come from knowing who Nathaniel was. And Nathaniel responded, "Where did you get to know me?" Furthermore, he must have thought, "I have not known you, or would not have given you any regards to you, especially being from Nazareth." Jesus then replied, I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." This was to indicate that Jesus knew Nathanael's life was lived as a devout Jew. It must be understood that during the heat of the day, the devout Jew would often seek the shade of a tree to read the Torah and pray. This insight and to be able to cast aside Nathanael's ill-conceived prejudice caused Nathanael to respond, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Now, John's account of this event gives us insight into how to deal not only with the prejudices which we may have, but also with others who may be living a life full of hate due to ill-conceived prejudices. Philip's command of "come and see" is a command to allow our lives to get beyond preconceived, misguided thoughts and debilitating egos. It is a command that we bear witness to those who are overcome by hateful prejudice by being the living example of God's love. In this way, they may see and experience this love in us. Living this love does not mean that we must agree with the other person who may be filled with hate, but it does mean we are to continue to be that shining example of love, which is our only hope for the future. Love demands that we denounce the evil and hate that which has so consumed this nation, while not falling prey to hate's evil tentacles. Sadly, Very sadly, there are false prophets who are giving credence to prejudice, hate, and sedition in the name of Christ. This is not the Christ who called Philip and Nathaniel and who calls us each day to love and care for our fellow human beings, our brothers and sisters created by God. We must never waver from the truth of God's message through Jesus. We must never let lies become accepted truths, for that leads us to certain death and destruction. Now is the time to be renewed in God's call to love and reaffirm this call as the prophet of old responded, "Here am I, send me." This is definitely the time in which we need to let it be known who we are by the love which we proclaim and live. Our living witness rejects the evil and hate which is beginning to test our very soul as individuals and as a nation. But with this stand of living our life in God's love, let us be strengthened and comforted in Jesus' words. I am with you always to the end of the age. I am with you always. Amen.